And welcome back to another episode of the Jag Bros. This is Joey Raymond here with my two older brothers, JT and Jack. We are three brothers who are lifelong Jag fans, and we are here to help you get through this offseason as we are very excited for the 2024 Jag season coming up. We have made a lot of moves this offseason so far in the free agency, and we still have the draft to come. It is an exciting time for the Jaguars. How are y'all feeling about this offseason so far, JT and Jack?
Yeah, I told y'all this was going to be a big offseason. Clearly, Baalke is feeling the hot seat because he is uber aggressive in free agency. There is one move I think we'll obviously talk about, him not going after Ridley, that some fans are happy about, some are very upset about. But overall, he's been really, really aggressive, and that's what I love to see.
2 years ago, we were very aggressive in the offseason, and that paid huge dividends for us on the field, making that ginormous leap from Trevor's year one to Trevor's year two. Last year, however, it felt like we put it on cruise control during the free agency, and it also felt like we put it on cruise control during the season. So if there's any correlation there, it typically seems like over the NFL, over the last few years especially, the teams that spend the most during the offseason tend to see some good return on that investment in the following year. So hopefully we'll see that on the field in 2024 as well.
You know, the analogy that I've been thinking about for the Jaguars, and especially for Baalke, is it feels like we're the tortoise and the hare story. We like run, sprint, make all these big moves, feel like we're either catching up or pulling away, and then we just get really complacent. So hopefully...
Wait, that's what the hare does, Jack. The hare's the one
that... don't let the tortoise catch up to us. Yeah, sorry, we're the hare. We're the hare. I got that backwards. We're the hare in this, where we sprint and then, chill out and then sprint again. Because in 1 week, we made more moves than I think we made the entire offseason last year.
Yeah. And unfortunately, in that moral of that story, I'm pretty sure the hare comes in last. So that's not a good situation for us. So,
which is typical Jaguars.
Good point.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you can tell that Baalke has changed his entire game strategy. He was thinking that, we were kind of arriving, we didn't need to do anything new, and we can just improve our players and develop players, and they'll just get better on their own. But he came to see that that is absolutely not going to happen in the NFL. You actually have to make moves in the free agency. You have to draft better and get starters, not just depth players. And what I like to see is that he realized his mistake, and it seems like he is changing it. We had a huge offseason, signing 7-8 players so far, and I really like the signing. So what we're going to cover in our podcast episode today is we're going to go ahead and grade the already signed free agents that we have. We'll go over a few of the still needed spots and kind of discuss what the Jags need to do to finish up this offseason to get ready for the 2024 season.
So looking at this class right now, I already said I love the aggressiveness, but I don't love every single move. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a solid B for Baalke. I think he had some A's, which we'll break down each signing, but I also think he had some misses or overpays. And I think there are some still big holes, such as wide receiver, such as a third edge rusher. So I think there's still some work left to be done. And hopefully he can hit a home run in the draft, which is really tough to bank on given Baalke's past draft history. But overall, for the free agency, I would give this a B.
Ditto everything you just said, Jack. B as well. I think I like his idea. I like the aggressive nature. However, the actual execution of that, I don't think worked out the way he wanted it to work out in every scenario. And there's some players I'm lukewarm on. And so, yeah, I'd give it a B.
Well, I'm more optimistic than y'all. I have it more at a B plus A minus. I don't think that there were many misses at all in this free agent class. And I'm really excited almost about every single one of them and what they can do for this team and how they may fit this scheme.
Can you call it a Baalke masterclass, Joey?
I will not call it a masterclass until I see the draft as well. For free agency, I will say he is on the path to a masterclass, but how does he draft will determine if it is a masterclass this offseason.
That is a bold statement. On the path to masterclass. This is not an on the path to masterclass, but let's dive into some of these players.
Okay.
We will see. Time will tell. I definitely felt like the 2023 draft was a masterclass, and maybe some of those picks will prove us wrong this year. But I definitely regret that statement back then.
I was the one throwing cold water on that statement back then, where you guys are sitting there sucking the teal Kool-Aid all over the place.
No comment from me, but we're gonna break down these guys. Let's look at the first one. So Arik Armstead, that was the defensive tackle from the 49ers. Interestingly, he was a Baalke pick when he was the GM for the 49ers. So he's 6'7", 295 pounds, 3-year deal, $51 million, a defensive tackle. What would y'all grade this signing?
A+. This is the jewel in the crown. This is an immediate upgrade over Fatukasi or anybody else we have on the interior part of our defensive line. He's been a playmaker. He's a difference maker. He is somebody that was the cornerstone in some respects of a very, very good 49ers defense. This was a great get and a nice veteran presence for our team.
A lot of people are drawing conclusions on how he looks a lot like Calais Campbell when we drafted or signed him back in 2017. And I think that he could be just as impactful as Calais Campbell was with this Jags. They are very comparable. He is a leader over at San Francisco. When he was there, he's a captain. He was voted Walter Player of the Year a lot. I love to see that we are getting not just talented players, but also leaders. Almost everyone that we signed was some sort of captain or leader of the team. And it's really nice to see that we're going to be bringing in some veteran presence to this locker room, which I believe we were missing a lot last year.
So letter grade, Joey?
I'm going to go with an A, not an A+, only because I know that he has some injuries. He has a meniscus surgery coming up. I think it won't bother him at all, but just because of possible injury prone, I'm going to mark it an A instead of an A+.
Yep. I give this one an A as well. This is crazy. Y'all want to guess how many sacks did the Jacksonville Jaguars get from the defensive tackle position last season? Every single player on the Jaguars defense who played defensive tackle, how many sacks did they get last season?
Roy Robertson Harrison got at least 1 or 2. I would guess 3.5.
I think it's exactly 2.5.
So it's technically a defensive end, which means the Jaguars had 0 sacks at that position.
Oh, wow.
It's an obvious upgrade. You get a big guy in the middle. And how many times do the Jaguars get run over on 3rd or 4th and short, running the ball up the middle? So yeah, huge upgrade. You have to give Baalke credit because Armstead even said, I kept in touch with Baalke, and that was part of the reason he came back to Jacksonville. So maybe part 1 to Baalke's masterclass this offseason.
I want to pose a question for y'all real quick, because we wouldn't have Arik Armstead if we signed Calvin Ridley. So who would you rather have gotten? Keep Calvin Ridley and not have Arik Armstead, or let Calvin Ridley walk and have Arik Armstead? Which one do you like better?
That's a great question there. All offseason, I've been fine letting Calvin walk. My biggest gripe is who we actually got to replace him. I don't think is near the receiver we need him to be, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes with Gabe Davis. So if you told me in a vacuum, let Calvin walk for Armstead, I would say absolutely. I think that's a good, smart move. I just would have rather us gone a different direction at wide receiver. That's my opinion.
Yeah, no one's gonna be shocked. I said 2/3 way through the season, I think this is the off season that you let Ridley walk, hold on to that 2nd round draft pick. And technically, if you want to look at the numbers, I mean, Armstead is significantly cheaper than Ridley. So he's about 16, 17 million a year, where Ridley is 22, 23, $24 million a year, close to $100 million deal for Ridley. But yeah, we're definitely going to talk more on the receivers. That'll be one of our big focus points, but great question. But yeah, let's look at Ronald Darby. So staying on the defensive side of the ball, cornerback out of the Ravens, a 2-year deal up to $10 million max. He is from Florida State, so shout out to any Knowles fans. But what do y'all grade this signing for the Jaguars?
I grade this one a solid B plus. He is a journeyman, but what I could tell is that the Ravens were really upset that they didn't get him back, which lets me know that he's a really good player, that the fans really like him, and he obviously fits the scheme to Ryan Nielsen's new defense much better than I think Darius Williams did. He plays press man and brings a bit more of a presence for Tyson Campbell to kind of grow. And then maybe if we get another cornerback as well, a man that can help guide these guys and show them how to win, because he just played for the Ravens, who made it to the AFC Championship.
Yeah, the Ravens have been known for playing more aggressive. They tend to play more man. And so essentially what you're talking about is taking out Darius Williams, who is about the same age, maybe slightly younger than Darby. Joey, you're right. He's played for 5 different teams in the 9 seasons at the NFL. He's played in almost all his games, though. So that's a good sign. He's got 8 career interceptions. I don't know enough about him in kind of the style that he does. So I'm going to trust that they've done their homework and he fits the scheme pretty well. So I'll give that one a solid B plus as well.
I'm a little lower, actually, because of that number you just said, JT. 8 picks in 9 seasons. I love a corner who's making big plays and more of a ball hawk, and he's not. Not to say that he's not a great corner, because he is a press man. He is a physical corner. He has 4.3 speed, and he'll make tackles. All these were obviously needs on the Jaguars last year, but I love a Jaguars defense who makes a lot of turnover plays, and Darby is just not that guy. So I'm going to give it a B minus. He's a good fit for what I believe Ryan Nielsen wants to do, and he is a better price. So 2 years, $10 million is significantly cheaper than D Will, even though I love D Will.
If you're hoping for a high turnover season again, I think that's probably not going to be in the cards for the Jags, because when you do play more man and press man, they just tend to have less turnovers. Higher zone teams tend to be the teams that have more interceptions, particularly because it's typically confusing for quarterbacks. So I would imagine our turnovers to dip either way. And so a guy who plays good press man, you're sacrificing the opportunity to potentially get 5 or 6 interceptions out of that position.
Right. With the zone, it's a kind of high risk, high reward. You may give up a big play, but you also may undercut something and pick it off. Whereas man, you're kind of lowering that risk, but you're also lowering the return of a turnover.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it just depends on what you're going to be doing. So I wasn't expecting a lot of interceptions from him, as long as he has a lot of pass defenses. That's the key.
Which he doesn't have
somewhere. I
Yeah,
saw somewhere
I mean,
he has 97 pass defenses, so you're averaging about 1 every other game. So
so Darby had 7 pass deflections this past year, where D Will was top 3 with 18. So, again, it's a move. It saved you some money, and I think it addressed a bigger need, which was Darnell Savage, safety from the Packers. What an awesome name. Hopefully he just plays up to that. But 3 years, $21 million. There's a lot of potential he'll stay at that safety position or potentially move to slot corner. Do y'all have any thoughts on that? And what would you grade the signing for Savage?
I don't know too much about Savage. I'm going to go ahead and grade it a B minus, only because I talked to some Green Bay Packer fans and they weren't too sad to see him go. So that makes me a little bit worried about him, but I assume that Ryan Nielsen knows who he wants and went out and got who he wanted. So I'm not going to sit there and trash him. And as I just said, I don't know that much about him. So I'm just going to mark it as a solid B minus.
Yeah, B for me as well. He's a solid starter. I think he's like Darby. He's a guy that you want to have compete for the positions. Ideally, we've talked about before and highlighted him several times. Antonio Johnson, he is probably going to be somebody you want to start, whether that is at nickel, whether that is at safety. But what these 2 moves do is it takes you from having to must pick a 1st or 2nd round defensive back in the draft to now you can use one of those picks for a defensive back, but you don't have to.
Also is a nice safety blanket for Antonio Johnson, just in case he doesn't quite develop as much as they want him to. They can use him more a little bit like a Swiss blade, either the nickel or safety, and they can rotate him and Savage in. It just allows a safety net and not that expensive.
Yeah, I have Savage graded slightly higher than you guys. I have B plus, mostly because I agree with everything y'all said, but I also think letting Jenkins walk, letting Herndon walk, in whichever position he ends up, I think it is a clear upgrade. Where to me, Darby and D Will was more of a lateral move. This is a nice upgrade for whatever position Savage ends up landing. And I love a guy that has versatility, especially on defense in the secondary, and another guy that has 4.3 speed. So we're going to have a lot more speed in our secondary, which will be nice. One more move on defense. I don't know if y'all have any thoughts on this. A quieter move this week. Trevis Gibson, outside linebacker from the Titans, had some good stats for the Bears a few years ago, but was pretty quiet for the Titans other than stealing someone from the Titans. Did y'all have any thoughts on this move?
This is the type of guy I like to take a risk on, right? He showed you flashes before in the past. What didn't work out with the current team. So it's almost ungradable, but I would throw that in the B range as well. He didn't cost a ton. He's shown you flashes. I'd rather take that type of guy and see if we can make that work, or cut bait if not. And obviously the edge position is a huge need to continue to add depth to.
I actually really kind of like this pick. He's not expensive. And what's really nice to see is that he actually played when he was at the Bears, and he had 7 sacks one season, and I believe like 3 or 4 another. He was under Bill Shuey, who is our outside linebacker coach currently. So he's already been under or been coached by Bill Shuey. He knows kind of his scheme. And it seems like a lot of the free agents we got either have some sort of previous ties to the coaches or previous ties to Florida. So I love that we're going out and getting people that we know and that we can maybe elevate, that aren't doing so well in other people's schemes.
I love all the Florida guys and Duval guys. Let's keep it in the Sunshine State for sure. But hey, before we switch over to the offensive side of the ball, look at some of those moves. What would you say about our defense after this first week of free agency? Would you say they're significantly better, slightly better, the same, significantly worse, slightly worse? Where would you put our defense after this week?
I put it slightly better, but I still want to see us get quite a few defensive draft picks. Go ahead and get some younger players to fill in some of these older players that we just picked up in the free agency.
Slightly better. I thought you were going to roll with significantly.
I'll take the bait, Joey. You're Mr. Optimism. I don't know about significantly. I think that might be, but I think solidly better is the right description. Just about every position is an upgrade over the guy we had previously. Gibson's is better than Chason. Darby is a guy that might be slightly worse than Williams, but obviously Armstead is much better than Fatukasi, who we let walk. So I would say solidly better, but our defense is going to look radically different than what it did last year. So it's really hard to say, is the sum of the parts going to be better, even if the individual pieces at least appear on better on paper.
You know what? I'm tempted to say significantly better, and I really want to, and that's usually what I do, but I am going to temper some of my expectations. But I agree. I think they got better at every position, but I do think there's still some work to be done on this defense. Specifically, I think we need one more corner. And so I look for that in the draft. And then I also think we need one more edge guy, because you can just never have too many guys that can rush the passer. So I would say we're clearly better than what we were, but we also were starting at a pretty low bar. So I'm happy with what we did on defense, but I think there's still more work to be done. But let's talk about the side of the ball everybody loves to talk about. That's offense. Let's score some points. Let's build around number 16. And I'm going to turn it over to y'all. Where do y'all want to start? So we signed Mitch Morris, center from the Bills. We traded for Mac Jones, backup quarterback for us, quarterback from the Patriots. Gabe Davis, wide receiver from the Bills, and Devin Duvernay, wide receiver, return specialist from the Ravens. Where do y'all want to start here?
Let's start with some agreement. First, before we probably start differing, Morse is I think the one that unanimously every Jaguar fan's excited about. You talk to most Bills fans, they're disappointed that they let him walk. He's not like a top 5 center by any means, but he's a solid to slightly above average center. And the Bills fans are mad they lost him, and he wasn't that expensive. So I think this was the best signing of all of the people on offense, in my opinion.
Yeah, I give this one an A plus as my favorite signing. The Jaguars listened to the fans. Luke Fortner was not it. It's a huge upgrade. Yes, he may not be a top 10 center, but he's a very solid center. He has a lot of experience. He's worked with Doug Peterson before. He's worked with Patrick Mahomes. He's worked with Josh Allen. So he's worked with a lot of elite young guys, kind of bringing them up, mentoring him. Everyone says how great of a person he is. The media really likes him. Like, he's very open and talkative. And I really think that he's going to be a huge presence on this offensive line and will be directing them. Whereas Luke Fortner, I don't believe, was directing anybody. So this is an absolute A plus signing.
Easy grade, A plus. A significant upgrade. He only gave up 1 sack versus 4 sacks from Fortner. And the worst part is Fortner was even worse at run blocking. And Morse is great. The Bills were able to run the ball up the middle very well. So that'll be nice to be able to actually do a running back draw or quarterback sneak on 3rd and short instead of having to get fancy and cute on those plays for the Jaguars. And yeah, Joey, I agree. He's a really fun interview. The dude is funny. You know, go look up on Jaguars YouTube some of these interviews with these new guys because Morse is a team player. He's a leader. And whatever the Jaguars do, I think with him and with restructuring Sheriff, they were able to save some money. And I think you'll see them draft 1 or 2 young guys on that interior offensive line and let Morse and let Sheriff mentor them and train them up to be the future of Trevor's O-line.
All right. Who do we want to do next? Let's start diverging. Are we going to go Gabe or are we going to go Mac?
We'll go with a shorter one. Let's go with Mac. I have no problem with us trading for him. I like that he's a Duval guy, and I do like that he seems a lot happier here. And I do respect that he was in a really bad position in the Patriots. Like, Bill Belichick seems to almost abuse him, and like it was a really bad situation for him. This is the first time a lot of people are saying they've seen him smile in like over a year. So I like that we're helping him out, and I do believe that he's much better than CJ Beathard. So I have no arguments with it. I think it's a C plus, a B. Like, it doesn't really do anything for me, but like, it's solid.
C minus for me. Why? It doesn't make any sense. Sure, Joey, I'm happy from a human perspective that he's happier, but he's played in the NFL for 3 years. At this point, he's a known commodity. Is he better than CJ Beathard? Maybe, but he's also more expensive and he's toward the end of his contract as well. So you got a rental for the backup. I would just as rather draft if you want to just take a chance on another quarterback, draft a quarterback in the 6th round and see what happens. I don't know. It was that was a head scratching move to me.
I would disagree with the statement that he's a known commodity. I actually feel the opposite. I mean, his rookie year, he was incredible. I mean, he leads the Patriots to the playoffs. Everybody's talking about this is the guy for the future. And then what do the Patriots do? They bring in a defensive coordinator to call the plays on offense. I mean, we don't like Press Taylor, but at least he's always been on the offensive side of the ball. And the Patriots just have no weapons. Yeah, it was a hot mess. I don't know if there's a bigger mess other than probably the Panthers than the Patriots. And so yeah, I don't think it was a home run pick by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's a B pick. It's low risk, medium reward, because hopefully he doesn't see the field, right? So the goal is that he's just going to be a solid backup. He's going to be an option. But also just looking across the NFL, how wild is it? How many of these 1st round guys are going for 5th, 6th round picks just 1, 2, 3 years later?
Oh, it's crazy. These quarterbacks are going for pennies on the dollar right now. Talk about a depreciation of value. It seems to be the quarterback. If it's not absolutely correct, then they drop in value. And I don't think he's going to be that much more expensive. Mac Jones, I think, realizes if he wants to stay in this league, he's going to need to ask for a lot less money and be a backup. Because I don't think anyone's looking for him as a starter, at least not right now. Now, if he comes in and plays really well for like 2 games, maybe he can change that and he can go off somewhere else. But as of right now, I think he's going to be knowing where his position kind of lies and trying to rehab his image.
Hey, let me stir the pot here a little bit. You know, some of our family calls me the instigator sometimes. I want to stir the pot a little bit because so the Jaguars collapsed at the end of the year. We go 1-5 at the end of the season. If the Jaguars start the same way they finish, and if we start 1-5, are you guys calling for Trevor to be benched and Mac Jones to be in?
I'll be calling for Press Taylor to be fired. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It
Probably
would
Baalke,
depend
too.
on the type of losses. Are we talking about like we lost by a field goal and it was really close and Trevor played well, but we just didn't finish out the game? Or Trevor threw like 3 interceptions. He's the reason we lost. And he's just the turnovers seem to really be getting to him.
Barring injury, I think you have to ride Trevor into the ground next year, even if it's the worst case scenario. And then you just don't re-sign him, or you have to do some sort of, I don't even know what you do. You probably have to pivot away from him at that point. But I don't see a scenario where Trevor's healthy and Mac Jones is getting significant playing time. But my opinion is Mac's already a known commodity. So yeah, there are probably people that would take the other side of that, yourself included, Jack.
No, I'm just stirring the pot. I thought we'd get a bigger take. I'm with you guys. I would not in any circumstance. Trevor clearly has the higher ceiling by a mile than Mac Jones. Do I think Mac Jones could potentially be an average starter in the NFL? Yeah. But Trevor has the ceiling to be a superstar quarterback. So you've got to keep trying to see, even if they start and struggle. I think you definitely make a different move, whether it's a different move at wide receiver, a different move with Press Taylor, whatever it is, Doug's calling the plays. But I think under no circumstance do you place Mac Jones above Trevor Lawrence if Trevor Lawrence is healthy.
The only way I say Mac Jones starts and Trevor is healthy is if for multiple games he is having multiple turnovers, 3 interceptions, 4 fumbles. You know, he has had turnover issues. I don't think that it's going to be a common problem. I do think that he can fix it. But if that continues, then I could see a chance where Mac Jones gets to play a game or two to get Trevor's head back in it. But it wouldn't be a full, like, sit down for the rest of the season.
Let's shift gears to the wide receivers. This is probably the hottest of arguments amongst Jaguars fans, and it depends on how you evaluate Calvin Ridley. What do you do to backfill his potential loss? And then how do you evaluate the signing of Gabe Davis? Now, we were on the live show a week ago or so reacting to some of the news within seconds. We've now had a week to digest. Where are you guys at with that signing? How would you grade Gabe Davis now being a Jaguar?
Yeah, go watch the YouTube live. So if you're not following us on YouTube, that continues to be one of our fastest growing platforms. That was our first one all together. So that was a ton of fun. It's all over the place, but we had a blast. So that is the Jag Bros podcast on YouTube. But I'm going to let you roll, Joey, because you are the highest on Gabe Davis. You actually called this pick probably about a month ago. You said this was a guy you liked in free agency. And let me ask you, Joe, not only what are you grading it, but are you going to buy a Gabe Davis jersey for the Jags?
I'm thinking about buying a jersey, but I also have bad luck with buying jerseys. I bought a Calvin Ridley jersey out in 1 year. I bought a Nick Foles jersey.
Ouch.
Injured. Yeah. And it just doesn't seem that my jersey buying brings good luck. So I may not put that on Gabe Davis, but I actually love the Gabe Davis pickup. I think it's an A for the Jaguars. I think he has incredible upside. I think he has the ability to be a number 1 wide receiver in the right circumstance. And I believe the Jaguars is the right circumstance because we now have a wide receiver who's tall. We now have a wide receiver who can take the ball deep. I trust in his hands. He doesn't have that many drops. I trust that Christian Kirk can be an incredible slot guy. You have a reliable Evan Ingram to catch your third down passes. And then Zay Jones is your third guy who kind of is your Swiss Army knife, whether you need someone to kind of fill in the hole. But I like that Gabe Davis already seems to have chemistry with Trevor. You saw them at the players together. You see them taking photos together. Like, he's a Florida guy. He played at UCF. His mom's from Fernandina Beach. Like, it seems like the chemistry is way better with Gabe Davis already, and he hasn't even played it down with Trevor Lawrence than Calvin Ridley ever had with Trevor Lawrence. They never on the same page. He was running the wrong routes. Yes, Calvin Ridley has a ton of talent, but it just didn't seem like it was fitting with the Jaguars. He seemed very similar to kind of Christian Kirk and Zay Jones. There was nothing really different about him. That's what I think was a real problem. He didn't fit the offensive scheme, and I think Gabe Davis fits it better, and I think that it's actually going to be a really good pickup for the Jags and for Gabe Davis to get out of Stephon Diggs' shadow and be a big name for the Jaguars.
Man, I want to buy the hype so bad, but I'm going to stay more grounded because here's what I did last offseason for all the Jag Bros faithful that have been listening every episode. If not, I guess you can go back to episode 3 or 5 or whatever that was. But when we got Calvin Ridley, hadn't played for 2 years, I was so on board with the hype. I was like, he is going to break out at practice. He looks so fast and so quick. And Devontae Adams said this guy's going to be a top 5 receiver in the league. And I'm like, I am all in. Ridley is not going to be stopped. So I'm going to ease off on the hype for Gabe Davis, even though I want to jump on the bandwagon with you, Joey. And I'm going to give it a B. And I actually thought about going lower because he's got some big problems. So Gabe Davis is not explosive. He's not a separator. He doesn't get open. He's more of a deep threat guy. He's more of a vertical threat, which is why I like the move. It's a better fit, but he's not a wide receiver 1 to me. He just doesn't have the tools to break away. He's about a 4.5, mid 4.5 speed guy. And look, he's coming from the Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen, a great offense, and he's never gone above 800 yards. So I give it a B, especially when you look at what was going on in the other options for the wide receivers in free agency and the price of a lot of these guys. I think this was the best possible scenario, but I'm going to just say, and I'm sure we'll get into it more, I think the Jaguars still need to do work in the receiver room.
I completely agree with that last statement, Jack. The Jaguars need to do work on the receiver room. I gave it on the live show a C+ or a B-. That was where we still had the opportunity to re-sign Ridley. That didn't happen. And so I'm going to have to lower my grade to a C. Because here's the reality of the situation. As much as Joey is painting a rosy picture, there's a lot of other Jaguar fans painting a rosy picture about Gabe Davis. He was on a better offense with a better quarterback, with better offensive coordinators through the years, and they could not figure out how to unlock him. The amount of games where he put up 0 yards, 0 receptions, 0 anything. And it speaks to what you were saying, Jack. There's the fact that he seems to be more of a boom bust type of receiver for his route tree. He also does not have the separation that Calvin Ridley has. I mean, Calvin Ridley, guys, had over 1,000 yards. He had 8 touchdowns, not to mention the 250 plus yards of receiving he got on pass interferences that are stats that don't necessarily show up in his stats. So, I mean, you're talking about replacing 1,300 yards, and I mean, it'll be
1,300 yards.
Gabe
Are
Davis,
you kidding me?
Well, Gabe Davis will probably get us 700, about half of the production that Calvin Ridley did. I mean, Calvin Ridley accounted for about 1,300 yards for the Jaguars last season.
Hey, guess what? Christian Kirk never had 1,000 yards. And what did he do when he came here? got over 1,000 yards. Just because you didn't do it at one team doesn't mean that's exactly how you're going to be used at another team. So do you think Kyle Pitts will always suck if he doesn't if he moves on from the Falcons?
That's not the same thing, because you
It
and I
is the
both
exact
know
same
that is
thing.
not the exact same thing, because the Bills offense has been a top 3 offense for all the seasons that Gabe Davis was. You're talking
Again,
about,
they never were looking at Gabe Davis as a number one. They had Stephon Diggs. They had
you still
Knox.
should
They
see it. You
had
should still
the
see more solid production than what you saw. And
he
by the
had
way,
solid
Christian Kirk
production.
had
If your third wide
982.
receiver has 800 yards, what is not solid about that?
Who was the second wide receiver for the Bills?
Dalton Kincaid.
Dalton Kincaid was a rookie tight end last year. Oh, by the way, we had a rookie tight end that had, 30
Yeah, and
yards
guess
last
what?
season?
He had more targets than Gabe Davis did. They weren't looking
That's
at Gabe
my
Davis.
point. Well, targets are earned. It has nothing to do with working hard for targets. It has to do with, are you open? Are you reliable? Are you in a position to catch and do the ball? And for Christian Kirk, all you saw every single year was a continual improvement with the Cardinals. And he was a team, the Cardinals were not a team that was a very high explosive offense, not like the Bills have been consistently during the time of Gabe Davis. And you're right, Joey. Dalton Kincaid did come in and did start becoming the second best target in that team. And so you're talking about a rookie tight end supplanting a guy who's been in the system for 4 years they could never unlock. So no, I'm not as high on Gabe Davis. I would have much rather us go Darnell Mooney or somebody else who, hey, there's reasons why they weren't as successful as they were. Gabe Davis is a huge downgrade to Calvin Ridley in my mind.
Davis is a lateral move from Calvin Ridley.
I don't think the Jaguars or any of us, I know it's an easy comparison, but I don't think it's the comparison to make, because look at the money. The Jaguars paid Gabe Davis 3 years, $39 million. The Titans paid Calvin Ridley 4 years, $92 million. So the Titans are saying, hey, Calvin Ridley is a wide receiver 1. The Jaguars are paying Gabe Davis wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 money. So I don't think we need to throw on the expectations of Gabe Davis being a star wide receiver. I don't think that's who he is. Potentially can he develop, but I don't love that he never seemed to really improve for the Bills, but he is a good fit for the Jaguars. He brings size, which we desperately need in the wide receiver room. None of our guys right now are big, other than Zay Jones, who struggles to be on the field, but Parker Washington's not a big guy. Devin Duvernay, who we also got, is not a big guy. Christian Kirk is not a big guy either. And so you bring size, you bring a red zone threat where, hey, the Jaguars were one of the worst offenses. So I like the move, but it's not a move that I think Gabe Davis is going to be a wide receiver 1. And I don't think the Jaguars think that, because they didn't pay him wide receiver 1 money. So that's where I think the Jaguars need to make some sort of move. And hey, they're definitely looking at moves. The Jaguars have been floated in rumors with a trade for Brandon Ayuk from the 49ers, a trade for T. Higgins, or that they would select a wide receiver 1 at pick 17 in the NFL draft. So let's look at, do you think the Jaguars make a move for another wide receiver, or do you think the wide receiver room for the Jaguars is set?
Jack, I think that's such a perfect point, because you want to know who would agree with you and I on the Gabe Davis not actually being a one-to-one fulfillment of Calvin Ridley. I think that's Baalke, because it's clear based off of what he's done since the initial news of Calvin Ridley being released from Jacksonville is that he is not satisfied with this wide receiver room. And so where there's smoke, there's fire. I know we pursued both those guys. I think they're going to be way too expensive for what they should be. And so I don't see us going after either one of those guys. So yeah, we're going to have to find another wide receiver to beef up that room, because a Gabe Davis, Zay Jones, Christian Kirk wide receiver combo is maybe the 7th or 8th best in the AFC.
I think that if push came to shove, they would be okay moving with just these guys. But I do absolutely believe that they're not done with this wide receiver room. And I don't think that they technically should be. I do think that they should draft more than they should go get a free agent. I don't think T. Higgins is in the cards. I really haven't seen that many stories other than kind of hopes and prayers from the fans. But the Brandon Ayuk one was very real. A lot of reporters were reporting on it. It seems like they wanted a first-round pick, Zay Jones, and we were supposed to pay Brandon Ayuk, which just was too rich for our blood. Now, if the 49ers came down on what they wanted, I think that could possibly happen. If they wanted a second, maybe Baalke does that. If they did a third, for sure, I think Baalke would do it. So I don't think that it's out of the cards yet for Brandon Ayuk. I just don't think at right now it's going to happen. So I would 100% address it in the draft, and I would address it early, first or second round.
Yeah, I roll with a first round pick here. I love Ayuk. I love what he's done for the 49ers. I think it'd be a great fit, but the price would be very steep. A first round pick, Zay, and a very big payday to Ayuk would be a very tough pill to swallow, especially when this is a loaded draft class at wide receiver. So many people are saying this is the best or the best in 25, 30 years at this position. I like it. Pick 17. You actually can trade back a few spots. And Doug Pearson actually talked about at the NFL Combine twice. He was talking about trading back as a potential option. And so I like moving back to the early 20s. And I think you'll have a great shot at either A.D. Mitchell, Adonai Mitchell out of UT, or Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU, who, hey, look, they're both over 6'2". They both ran low 4.3s. They're both tall, physical, deep threat guys that could be a true wide receiver number one finally for Trevor, because the reality is we haven't drafted a wide receiver earlier than the 6th round since we drafted Trevor Lawrence. And I think that's a huge mistake. And I think it's biting us in the butt. And I think it's time to finally get a remedy. Go get a alpha X wide receiver. Go get a big guy who can dominate.
Yeah, and our next episode, we're going to break down the draft much more in detail and what some of the strategies could be. And so as we're wrapping this one up, let's talk about the offense. I think we all said somewhere between slightly better to significantly better on defense. What is your read on the offense? Are we better, worse, or the same?
I would say about the same. I think we clearly, all of us agree that the best move of free agency was upgrading the weakest spot, the center. That was an A+ from all three of us. So that is great that we made that improvement. I thought we would maybe make one more move on the offensive line. Maybe we hit that in the draft, but our wide receiver room, even as much as I have harped on Calvin Ridley, Gabe Davis is not as good of a wide receiver as Calvin Ridley. And so that's why I'm still pounding the table saying we need to make more moves at wide receiver. So I would say the offense is about the same, slightly worse at wide receiver and slightly better offensive line, and not much else really. Mac Jones hopefully makes no impact.
I'd say it's slightly better, majority because of Mitch Morris. I think he really solidifies that interior offensive line, which we were crying for the entire season. I think because now you have a veteran known guy that won't be making mistakes. That means Brandon Sheriff can stop having to worry about Luke Fortner. Ezra Cleveland, we re-signed, and I think he'll finally be healthy. You have to remember when we traded for him, he was injured, and then he got injured again. So we haven't even ever seen him play at 100%. And him being next to a really good veteran, I think it really will help out that interior offensive line, which will drastically improve. I do think that it's more of a lateral on the wide receivers than JT and Jack think. But I also do believe that we will go and draft a wide receiver, and I think it will end up being a better offense with a rookie wide receiver, with Gabe Davis, with Christian Kirk. I think everything will match what they want to do on offense better than what they had with Calvin Ridley. You have to remember, we went out, got Calvin Ridley, and we almost did the exact same thing as if we had Marvin Jones Jr. Like, it wasn't that big of a difference. Yes, the stats were different, but the offense played just about the same. We got the exact same record. So
Yeah, worse. Our offense was worse last year.
exactly. So I don't think it's that big of a deal. I understand we wanted Calvin Ridley. I think it kind of sucks that we knocked the rust off of him and then he goes somewhere else. Like, that's what I think hurts the most about it. I don't really miss him that much. I think people are forgetting how many wrong routes he ran, how many plays he took off. He was really undersized. He was getting pushed on the line constantly. The reason he had all those pass interferences is because someone would touch him and he'd fall over. So I really don't think it's that big of a deal that we don't have Calvin Ridley as much anymore. But I do think that from what I have seen, actually, from Tank Bigsby workouts, he's gotten way stronger. I think that we will improve on this offense quite a bit.
You know what I forgot, Joey? I forgot that Ezra Cleveland played a game at left tackle, and Myles Garrett was talking him up of actually saying that he played pretty well. And that was something that the Jaguars talked about. The reason that they wanted Cleveland back so much is he is so versatile. So yeah, that's a good point. That's probably an under the radar move, but it might be one of the bigger moves in this offseason for the Jags. But JT, take it away. Is the Jaguars offense better, worse, or the same?
Worse. I think the gap from Ridley to Gabe Davis is larger than the gap of improvement of Fortner to Morse. Everything else, for the most part, I agree with you guys, and that's what we'll see. Because on paper, the Jaguars' offense should have been better in 2023 than they were in 2022, but they weren't, and a lot of that had to do with play calling. So, really, until Press Taylor gives up the play calling and actually starts to design offenses that make sense for the pieces that we have, I'll be very skeptical to see significant offensive improvement, even if Gabe Davis hits the ceiling that you painted for us here, Joey.
You realize that Calvin Ridley only ever hit those numbers is because Christian Kirk and Zay Jones were injured. Do you remember the games when they had both of them healthy?
You say that but in the reality is that the stats and the facts don't actually match your narrative there. So the games where Zay Jones and Christian Kirk and everybody were healthy, let's look at the best games that Calvin Ridley had, and they tended to coincide with those. For example, game 1 against Indianapolis, Ridley had 11 targets, 8 receptions, 101 yards, and a touchdown. That's pretty awesome. Finally, we get Finally, we get Zay Jones back against Tennessee, week 10. What does Calvin Ridley do? He puts up 9 targets, 7 receptions, 103 yards, and 2 touchdowns. The following week against Houston, 89 yards and a touchdown on 5 receptions. So the games where Calvin Ridley did the best is when we had the full receiving core, which makes sense into what you were saying earlier. Calvin really did struggle to get separation at times, and he would get beat off the ball. And that was when teams were able to overcover Calvin Ridley and double him, completely taking him away. But when he was truly one-on-one, teams really struggled to do that. And you look at all the other games too that he did, like those were the games where he was getting somewhere between 9 to 10 targets, or games where we had our full allotment of wide receivers.
All right, let me jump in here because I think you're half right, Joey. I think the big missing factor was that Calvin Ridley played better with Zay Jones on the field. And he even talked about this a lot in his interview of he felt like the Jaguars didn't use him correctly, as he likes to be more of a slot receiver, more of a route runner guy. But because the personnel, a lot of times, especially with Zay off the field, he was the lone X receiver in a ton of packages. And so, but I do think once Christian Kirk was out, you saw a crazy amount of targets. So there was some quote unquote stat padding toward the end of the season where 2 of his games, he gets over 100 yards because Christian Kirk is out, or almost over 100 yards. Sorry, Tampa was 6 for 90, and then Tennessee was 6 for 106 and a touchdown. So I do think some of the stats are fluff, but time's going to tell, because at the end of the day, look, I've been the guy that said walk from Calvin Ridley the longest time ago. I don't hate Calvin Ridley. I don't think his game is bad, but he is not a wide receiver 1. He wasn't at Atlanta. How did he do so well for 1,300 yards in only 1 season? It was because of Julio Jones. And how did he do well at times? It was when pressure was off him, when Zay Jones would take some of that deep threat, when Christian Kirk or Ingram would take some of that pressure. But he's not a guy that's going to go and dominate on his own. And so that's why I'm going to keep pounding the table. Wide receiver is a big need for the Jaguars in the draft.
Yeah, I think he's a number 1, but I don't think he's that elite number 1 that I think some of the Jaguar fans were hoping for. So great points there, Jack. So a longer episode during the offseason for us as we're breaking down some of the free agency moves. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Continue to follow us leave us reviews, give us some recommendations on some other things you would like us to cover here and during the off season when we have some more free time. Our next episode will be covering more of the draft and getting the Jaguar fans ready for that. Who do we want us to do, or who do we want us to pick? Where do you want us to, what type of strategies do you want us to employ with our picks? And we will go all through those things, but we'll close it as we always do.
Calvin Ridley Sting.